with the Chaos Dwarfs in Warcry and well and truly cemented within the meta, and my own video covering the Chaos Dwarfs or the Helsmiths of Hashut, whichever you prefer, being live and on the internet and for all to see, I thought it was time to go back into them and talk about the Blood of the Bull, or their underworld warband, which is part of the Helsmiths. As per usual, this will be a little bit rambly, a little bit informative, and a whole lot of fun. So let's dive right in. And we are back. We are on Warcrier. Links in the description on how to get to Warcrier. It's a fantastic tool, updated on the regular. And we are with Helsmiths of Hashut, and we are going to look at the Blood of the Bull. Now, the Blood of the Bull are a little bit odd, a little bit weird, a smidge on the strange side, because they are part of the Helsmiths, but they've got a few unique things that make them a little bit unusual compared to your usual additions to a warband. Firstly, these guys are unique, but they are not Bladeborn. That's really important. Games Workshop has traditionally released Underworld warbands as Bladeborn, and Bladeborn have their own very diverse list of restrictions and uses. However, recently they've stopped releasing them and instead have been adding in unique Underworld warbands that are simply just part of the grander warband they're part of, in this case the Helsmiths or the Chaos Dwarfs, or however you want to say it. What this means is you can take Zildraa, the hero himself, in any Chaos warband, but you just can't take the rest of his fighters outside of Chaos Dwarfs. If you want to take the full Blood of the Bull, you have to play Helsmith. You can't take the rest anywhere else. And also, there's a lot of internal synergy within these unique warbands, so there's actually very little reason to take Zildraa out of his warband, because he's very synergistic with the rest of his crew and the rest of the Chaos Dwarfs. So realistically, you'll only see the Blood of the Bull within the Helsmiths. Not only that, Zildraa, Tokar, Imadrin, Moradok, and Grisk all look like your standard Chaos Dwarfs, like your Hobgrot Vandals, or your Infernal Cohorts, or even your Flame Hurlers and War Despots. However, they do not share the same rune marks. This is important to note, because this means they can't use their more generic abilities. For example, Zildraa, who looks like a War Despot in stats and points and even model, is not a War Despot. He doesn't have the same rune marks, which means that Zildraa can't use Black-Hearted Conqueror. You will see this throughout. None of these models can use their generic equivalent abilities, with 3 exceptions. 1, they can all use the reaction where relevant, they can all use the double leave the land in ruin, and they can all use demonic empowerment, I think it's called, which is their generic quad. Beyond that, they don't do anything else that their regular guys can do, but they can make use of demon points using their battle trait, so there is that. So these guys are very much unique. They have access to their own suite, and we're going to talk about that now, starting with Zildraa. And Zildraa is one of my favourite, actually, additions to Helsmiths, because Zildraa has the same stats as a War Despot. He's just as killy, just as durable, just as expensive. He can fit in quite nicely, but he doesn't replace the War Despot. The War Despot has Black-Hearted Conquerors, and that's such a powerful ability that Zildraa doesn't have. So you would never replace the War Despot with Zildraa, but you would definitely take Zildraa with a War Despot. And the reason for that is that Zildraa gets the cruelest of despot abilities. And this is a quad, and as a quad, in the new landscape that has become the Warcry competitive meta, the matched play meta, if you will, having a strong quad is really important, because we've lost Rampage. Rampage is gone now. It's become Reckoning, and Reckoning can't be used turn 1 unless you are doing a really bad job at surviving on turn 1. So you really want a solid quad for those turn 1 plays. And we have a solid quad for the rest of the game in the form of Demonic Empowerment. But on turn 1, that just isn't good enough. It doesn't really do anything on turn 1 even. It's quite a weak quad earlier in the game. This is where Cruelest of Despot comes in, because this is a fantastic quad on turn 1 and beyond, but especially turn 1. This allows you to pick 3 other visible friendly fighters within 6 inches that have the Helsmiths of Hashut rune mark, and then in their next activation, each of those fighters get to do it double for free, which is really powerful. In addition, if they've also got the Blood of the Bull rune mark, those abilities have a value of 6, which we will see why that's kind of important later on. It's not hugely impactful, but it does have some synergies within the Blood of the Bull. But the first part's the really important part, and that is getting free doubles. This allows you to convert your quad functionally into 3 doubles, which is incredibly powerful. It's so powerful, you could definitely make a triple, spend a wild dice to make a quad, and then use that, and it would still be fantastic value. This is amazing on turn 1, as it lets you just escalate your demon point generation faster than anything else, unless you rolled 3 doubles and it's like raw dogged 3 doubles on that roll. Cruelest of Despots is the way to go. Like 1 quad, Badoosh, that's 3 doubles, a quad and a double, that's 4 doubles functionally. This lets you use Leave the Land in Ruin 3 or 4 times in 1 turn to massively escalate your demon point generation from turn 1, giving you a fantastic start to then go into turn 2 when the combat really starts kicking off. You've got all those points coming in early. You've fueled yourself for the whole game off this 1 quad. It is incredibly powerful. It also has some sneaky stuff in it. So it says in their next activation, you could use Cruelest of Despots at the end of the turn. After everyone's already went, then boom, on your next turn, those models can use their free abilities. So it's not round dependent, it's activation dependent. And that's really kind of spicy. So overall, Zildraa fits this really solid role of the secondary War Despot, right? You take a War Despot for the movement, you take a Zildraa to secure that turn 1 momentum while still just bringing a fairly durable guy. Not only that, as we will see, Zildraa is a fantastic pick purely because Zildraa adds so much in other ways due to synergies with other fighters, which we will get to in just a little bit. But I can see Zildraa being a solid pick as your second hero. He does have the downside of being quite expensive, like a War Despot, which means that he does eat into your points a little bit. It can be difficult to get Zildraa, a War Despot, an Ashen Elder, and all the other toys you want into one list. But that's the art of list building. You've got to make sacrifices, and Zildraa might be worth that sacrifice. He definitely gives you a lot of escalation, and when he pops off on turn 1, that bit of security, you will definitely be thankful you had Zildraa in your list to make that quad really stand out. Sadly, Tokar, not so much. Tokar costs the same as a Infernal Razor with Flame Hurler. He has more or less the same stats. Notably though, he does have a worse melee stat substantially. He's got less attacks and a lot less strength, but that never matters. That flamethrower is what he'll be using even in melee. You would never punch, it's very silly. So Tokar, right off the bat, is just a flame hurler, but he doesn't have access to that ability to turn off abilities. What does he get instead? Well, sadly, he gets a worse version of that. He gets Demonic Blaze, which basically means you turn off reactions, and that is far less powerful. In most cases, turning off reactions just isn't really worth it. There are some use cases, for example, turning off a Pink Horror Split, or turning off Questa Soulsworn's ability to generate actions on death. There's a lot of powerful reactions in the game, and Demonic Blaze can absolutely just turn those things off, which is pretty darn spicy, I guess. But for the most part, you really want to turn off abilities instead. And sadly, Tokar can't for the most part. He can if the value of this ability is a 6 because it turns off reactions and abilities then. But you can't always bank on that. You can't always bank on having a full-powered ability value 6 Demonic Blaze going off. And frankly, if you are banking on that high value double, well, there's other abilities here that I think give you more. So if you want a Flame Hurler, you likely won't take Tokar, you would just take an actual Flame Hurler, which is a bit of a shame. He is probably the biggest loser here. That being said, going on to Imadrin, this lad is something special. Stats-wise, not so much. He's basically the gong equivalent of the Blood of the Bull. He has all the same stats. He's fairly middling in melee. His stats in defensively are slightly worse than a standard Infernal Cohort, but sadly he's also 5 points more expensive, so he's harder to take in your lists, and that could be a big downside. However, his ability, Tyrannic Declarations, is really good. This really allows you to push your objective control game to new levels of oppressive. Basically, when he uses this, for the rest of the battle round, any Blood of the Bull fighters near Zildraa count as an additional fighter when controlling objectives. Notably, Imadrin could be anywhere on the board. He doesn't have to be anywhere near this for this to work. You pop this and it functionally buffs your whole warband, and once they're next to Zildraa, they gain this wonderful +1 to their fighter count per guy, including Zildraa, right? There's no visibility restrictions. It doesn't exclude Zildraa. Zildraa is absolutely buffed as well. So with Zildraa just by himself, he becomes 2 models. If Zildraa's got a Tokar or an Imadrin or anyone else on the Blood of the Bull roster, well, they all then count as an additional +1. This really lets you make a solid vanguard and push an objective or be defensive and hold your backlines almost indefinitely because you have so much objective weight with so few models. And as a double, this is really powerful. Now, it can also give you +1 toughness if the ability value is a 6. And this is also quite powerful. A lot of the guys within the Blood of the Bull are only toughness 4. So they all got a toughness 5 now. That's pretty spicy. And Zildraa himself, being toughness 5 base, goes to toughness 6, which is also quite tough. So whilst not, again, this ability value of 6 isn't a outstanding buff to the ability, it is still a buff, and that +1 toughness can absolutely come into play. But you really are looking for just that base +1 to your fighter count, basically, and per guy when next to Zildraa, and that's such a powerful ability. And because of that, I think Imadrin might just be or if you're taking Zildraa, you're taking Imadrin, right? If you're dedicating to Zildraa, you have to take Imadrin to really just escalate that power. Of course, Imadrin himself gains this buff, so with just Zildraa and just Imadrin, you are getting 4 people worth of objective weight, which is pretty powerful in and of itself without having to invest any more points. But that's not to say you will just take Imadrin, because there are other good models, and I think Moradok is like the next one that's deceptively bad if you look at his stats, because he's 90 points, so he's 5 points more than a cohort, and he has all the same stats offensively as an Infernal Cohort in melee. His biggest downside is that he's only toughness 4 and not toughness 5. Why that is, I don't know. I assume the model is lacking a shield. His biggest downside, of course, is the fact that he's more expensive and is statistically worse than your standard guy. Of course, he goes very well with Imadrin and that +1 to the body count on objectives. But the real strength comes in Demonic Vigor. And Demonic Vigor is +1 to your crits, and if you have a value of 6, you additionally gain +1 strength and +1 attack. Now, if we take this back to Moradok and we look at this lad, with that, he goes to a 4-5-2-4. And that is a pretty darn solid stat line to have. And if you compare this to Demonic Power Points, well, that's exactly the stat line you would get if you have Demonic Power Points floating around. So that's not too bad, because you get the benefits of a fully powered Demonic Power Pointed Infernal Cohort without having to spend any Demonic Power Points. But then you combine it with Demonic Power Points. So now you're not just getting +1 attack, +1 strength, +1 crit, you're getting 2 to all of those things. So he's now a 5-6-2-5. And then Moradok suddenly becomes a serious threat in melee. You don't want to mess with a Moradok. He will smash through most mid-range, and how Demonic Vigor is worded you can actually do this in a way if you're in prolonged combat. So how demon points work is you have to use demonic power points at the start of the turn, then it's your first attack action that turn gains a bunch of buffs. Demonic Vigor is still your next attack action, but because of how abilities are used, you could use this after your first attack action. So you could have Moradok either buff up one attack and go +2, +2, +2 and hit really hard on one attack, or he could spread it out. Demon Point the first attack, then Demonic Vigor the second attack, and have a more consistent output. So there's a lot of play with Moradok. He is very interesting. For 5 points more, he becomes one of the killiest models in your actual warband. He far outscales your standard infernal cohort. He becomes more dangerous even than your Zildrakas, than your war despots. He's a pretty solid melee threat. He's just a little bit squishy. He's very much a glass cannon, and when you combine him with Zildraka and Imadrin and his own abilities, Moradok becomes a very tempting thing to take. And even without all of that support, just the potential just to buff up this random dwarf to incredible levels of destruction, I mean, I'm tempted to take him in any list. And if I was a silly man, if I was being a silly goose, I would give this guy innately +1 crit with a blessing, take him to 100 points, make him a true glass cannon just to escalate that damage even further, just for the memes. Because I do love myself a 2/6 profile, and Moradok can definitely hit that with all these buffs. So Moradok is definitely something to keep an eye on, especially if you get those juicy double sixes. If you can make one, or if you have one innately, you kind of want to put them into Moradok because he becomes pretty darn special once he gets all those buffs for free. The final model within the Blood of the Bull, though, it's Grisk. And Grisk on paper, like just about everything else, right? Everything else is a little bit too expensive for what they bring until you look at their abilities. And you go, oh, actually, this is pretty damn spicy. Apart from Tokar, who just kind of sucks. We have Grisk, and Grisk falls in that same category of, man, why would I take Grisk? Because people aren't hugely positive on the Hobgrot Vandals. I think that's a mistake. Personally, I quite like them. Grisk is 10 points more than a Hobgrot Vandal, and that's a tough sell. At 75 points, this guy is toughness 3 and 8 wounds with absolutely 0 melee potential. He also can't use demon points because he's a minion. So he's locked at this bad stat line, basically, was what we're saying. And he's expensive. The one benefit on his stat line is that this guy is moving 4. At moving 4, he's faster than any other Hobgrot in Helsmiths, which is not hard to do, and nor is it all that impressive. So why would you take Grisk? And the reason for that is he combos really nicely with Imadrin, because Imadrin doesn't have any sort of like rune mark restriction beyond just being a Helsmith. You don't need to be a warrior, for example, which means Grisk is involved in that. So if you have Imadrin on the board and Grisk is near a Zildraka and you pop off tyrannic declarations, then Grisk does count as 2 models, and that is definitely worth something. So Grisk is your cheapest option to go with a Zildraka Imadrin combo to really escalate your objective game. But not only that, Grisk has his own ability, and it is called Tenacious and Cowardly. Basically, this means if Grisk is killed and he has this ability active, then he doesn't die. All the damage points that were allocated to him once he hits to 0 are then removed and ignored, and he heals to 1, or he heals D3 if it's a higher ability value. Now, what this means is Grisk can't die in 1 hit, right? If you have this active, he will survive until he dies once, and he'll come back. So he survives a whole death. If you do this and then wait, then die, then activate, then do this again, and then do whatever, and then die, you could potentially revive twice in 1 turn. That's a bit silly, but you could do that. What this does, though, it makes Grisk actually your most difficult model to remove in an efficient manner, right? Because if he's with Zildraka and he's buffed by Imadrin, Grisk can't die, but he's worth 2 models. So you have to kill him, then you have to kill him again. And that's just like more investment to kill what is functionally a throwaway chaff model. Nobody wants to invest that many resources. Now, sadly, Grisk does not get to work with the reaction. The reaction doesn't specify a minion, it rather unusually specifies a model, the Hobgrot Vandal, which means that sadly you can't use Tenacious and Cowardly and then pick up Grisk to take a hit for your guys. But even without the reaction synergies with Grisk, Grisk still has the ability to be just a durable guy who lasts far longer than he should and then just vibes with Zildraa and holds objectives really damn well. So I think Grisk has play. He's quite expensive for what he is. But if you're going to take a Hobgrot Vandal and you're taking Zildraa and some more of the boys within the Blood of the Bull, I think you would spend those 10 extra points for Grisk just to play into that Tyrannic Declaration gameplay that the Blood of the Bull seems to be focused around, right? Like, out of all of these guys, I think Imadrin really solidifies what you want to do with them. They're meant to get onto objectives, punch a hole through the objective with efficient uses of demon power points and buffs, and then hold it. Just lock it down. Use Grisk as your throwaway, throw him in to distract other things, and then become cowardly and tenacious so he can't die and just be a nuisance. These guys want to work together and just get through there. Since your standard list size for a Chaos Dwarf list is typically around 8, if you were going to take the Blood of the Bull, you would take Zildraa, you would take Imadrin, and then you would take Grisk and or Moradok. And then you would put as many of these guys into one deployment group. Typically, this would mean you wouldn't put Imadrin with them. If you're taking all 4, you have Imadrin by himself, and then because the buff has no range, so you'd buff up the whole team, and you're good to go. If you were taking only 3 of them, you would of course have Imadrin with the rest of them, and you'd have that as your 3-man. It would absolutely depend on the rest of your list and how much you wanted to invest into the Blood of the Bull. Of course, you could take 3 or 4 of these guys. You could just settle on Zildraa, and that's completely fine because he's independently very good. But for me, I think that the bare minimum would be Zildraa and Imadrin working together as a tag team for objective play, and then you could build in more with Grisk and Moradok if you wanted some more source there. I think Moradok is a very natural upgrade to a Infernal Cohort, who you'll likely want in your lists anyway. If you've got those 5 points left over, taking a Moradok isn't all that difficult. So that's how I would do that. And that's the end of this video. If you liked what you saw, leave a comment and a like down below. Even hit subscribe if you're not already. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of the Blood of the Bull. Are you going to add them to your Helsmiths? Do you think they're a bit overpriced? Do you think their abilities aren't all that good? Or are you a big fan like me? Let me know either way. And until next time, lads, ladies, and everybody in between and beyond, ta-ra. Hey all, Toast here, and welcome to the post-toast credits. A massive shout out to all of my patrons and members, but an extra special shout out to all my algorithmic demon slayers: ABUNDCD, Andy Morris, blah blah blah, Brioche, Head Knight of Paint, Heinz D, Lord Phylax, Maps, Paulo Fernando Conclavis Perez for Hero, Sable Saber, Steve Bean, Houston Toad, and Velas. Thank you so much for supporting the channel, and I'll catch you all next time.